Have any of you seen the movie Liar, Liar? So it's a Jim Carrey movie. I think it came out in the 90s. And the premise of the movie is that it's about this man who just lies constantly. And this lying really gets to his son. And so his son, for one of his birthdays, the father doesn't show up because he's lying. And so at his birthday, when he makes a wish, before he blows out the candle, he says to himself, "I wish that for 24 hours my dad couldn't lie." And then he blows out the candle, and his wish comes true. And so the premise of the movie now is Jim Carrey cannot lie. The movie starts off with a scene in the boys' classroom, and the teacher's asking everyone, what do your parents do for work? And gets to this boy, and she says, "What does your father do for work?" And he says, "Well, he's a liar." and the teacher said, "Well, surely that's not what he does for work." And he goes, "I don't know. He goes to the judge and he defends people." She goes, "Oh, he's a lawyer." Well, it turns out he's a liar too. And so there's some funny moments in the movie where he cannot lie, and so he's walking to the courthouse, and as he walks by, there's a homeless person there, and the homeless person says to him, "Do you have any money?" And he says, "I do have money, and I don't want to give it to you because I'm cheap." And then he goes into his office, and one of the ladies there who has crazy hair, she goes, "How do you like my dress today?" And he goes, "It's good because it's taken away from your ugly hair." So he gets caught in these lie after lie, and he's finally in court one day, and he's talking to the judge, and he realizes he can't lie. And so he says to the judge, "I need an extension on this case." And the judge says, "Why?" And he says, "I cannot lie." And the judge is like, "Well, isn't that a good thing?" But he cannot lie, cannot tell the truth. And so he's realizing all these things that he's lying about in his life. But the one thing that he says when he disappoints his son is he tells him how much he loves him. And he realizes that he's not lying at that moment, that he really does love his son. And that love begins a transformation in him, begins a transformation of wanting to be there for his son, but also wanting to tell the truth. Jesus deals with these three really grave sins in our lives. Well, we heard in the gospel, he's talking about not only fulfilling the commandments, but fulfilling the heart of the commandments. So he talks about lying, talks about anger, and he talks about lust. Now, anger is an interesting one because anger is something that can run deep in us and it can fester in us. And I usually, you've heard this many times from me before, but there's usually two types of people that come to confession. One person says, "Father, I haven't broken any commandments. I'm not doing that bad." And then other people come in and they say, "I have probably broken every commandment." Which of those people do you think is closer to Jesus? The second one. Because they realize that we probably have broken every commandment. Well, what does that mean? Jesus is saying, not only do we need to keep the commandments, and certainly thou shalt not kill, but he says whoever is angry with his brother in his heart, and whoever comes to Mass and without first reconciling with his brother should leave those gifts at the altar, go reconcile with his brother, and then come back. And I wonder, what if we actually did that every week? What if before Mass? I know before couples it said, before you go to bed at night, if you're angry at each other, try to come to some kind of resolution before you go to sleep. But what if before we came to Mass every Sunday, we just examined ourselves and thought, is there anyone that I need to reconcile with? Anger is an interesting thing because it festers within us. I remember this was some months after the pandemic, and I was working out at a gym, and everything else had loosened kind of the restrictions except this gym, and it was the mask thing. So I was wearing a mask, working out, and there was nobody in the upper part of the gym, so I thought I was safe. I couldn't breathe, so I was going to pull my mask down a little bit so I could breathe as I was vigorously running on this treadmill. And this lady came upstairs and saw me, and she like just came straight across the gym, all the way in front of me, and said, "Lift your mask up." And I realized, like, why did she come up to me? So I was like, I'm working out here. I'm having difficulty breathing. She's like, "Lift your mask up." So I didn't. And then the manager comes. And so the manager comes, and sure enough, I do it. Well, then it starts festering in me. And I start thinking, like, I'm going to do this again, and what am I going to say to her when this happens again? So it was like 3 days later, right? And I finally, like, thought about what I was going to do. Same scenario. No one else is upstairs. I'm going to lift my mask down a little bit while I'm working out. And she comes right up to me, right in my face. "Put your mask on." And I screamed at her, pointed my finger and said, "Stay 6 feet away from me, stay 6 feet away from me." And the look on her face, she just like, but I thought I had let that anger fester in me for 3 days. And then the manager came up and I had to put my mask on. Anger is something that does fester in us. And Jesus is telling us, if the anger is even festering in you, before you do something or say something, allow that anger to release. Forgive your brother and sister. Reconcile with your brother and sister. Because anger is such a powerful, motivating sin in our lives. So if there's any anger in our hearts, to bring that to the Lord and to allow ourselves to be forgiven. The second is lust. He talks about the depth of lust, and he gives us the teaching on divorce, but he says, however, if you have even looked at a woman with adultery, you have already committed that adultery where? In your heart. And so he's getting to the depth of this as well. And we know that lust is a struggle. It is a constant struggle. And I was trying to look up some statistics online. I won't even tell you what they are, but it's pretty bad. It's an epidemic in our culture and in our world. And perhaps people that find themselves first even tempted to scroll by something or to rewatch something or to begin clicking through wouldn't believe how bad that can get. And Jesus is telling us, like, if you have any lust in your hearts, pluck your eye from your socket, cut your right hand off, and do not lust anymore. Now, this is one of the times, thankfully, that we're not supposed to take him literally, or there'd be a lot of people in patches and missing arms today. But we are supposed to take it to heart. And I think what he's getting at is that if we even begin to go down that path, if we begin to even dwell on that temptation that Satan may plant into us, it becomes like a snowball and may go further than we ever expected. And the further it goes, the harder it is to stop. And so he's warning us, he's telling us to take this to heart, that the moment those temptations come, that's the moment that we have the most freedom. In the first reading, the prophet says, "I set before you life and the death. Choose life that you may live." And I like that he's saying choose, because that means that we have a choice. And that choice is most free at that first moment of temptation. And the third is lying. Jesus is saying, let your yes mean yes and your no mean no. So what if we couldn't lie for 24 hours? I kind of was thinking about that. It might be a great Lent resolution to only say yes and no when you actually mean it. Now, there are times when we struggle with this. We struggle with saying yes to things or saying no to things that we feel like we want to do. But everybody knows what it's like, right? When you say yes to something you really don't want to be doing, and then you're resentful about it the whole time, and then you make it a miserable time for you and a miserable time for the people all around you. Like, just say yes when you mean yes, and no when you mean no. And everything else is from the evil one. Jesus is telling us not only to keep the commandments, but to keep the commandments at the very depth of our hearts. And he's also letting us know that we do have freedom. We do have the choice. We do have the ability to live out these commandments fully. And so as we prepare ourselves for Lent, which is coming this Ash Wednesday, less than a week away, I think it might be good just to reflect in our own hearts. Is there any deep-seated anger, any deep-seated lust, any deep-seated deception? And maybe that's the area that God wants us to work on during Lent. Maybe that's the resolution that he wants each one of us to make. We often hear or see in the courtroom, before a witness comes forward to testify, what do they say? Raise your left hand, put your right hand on the Bible. Is it the other way around? Raise your right hand, put your left hand on the Bible, and you say, I swear to tell the whole truth. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Why do we need a Bible to live like that? Why do we need to swear on a Bible to live like that? Jesus is telling to always live like this. So we come together and we celebrate this Eucharist with that desire that we can not only fulfill the commandments, but live them in the depth of our hearts.